Churches can be one of the worst places to go for abuse victims.
But churches are still one of the safest places to go with abuse issues.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark. I would also like to welcome everyone to today's program. So glad you've joined us. If this is the first time you've come to the American Religious Town Hall, a special welcome to you. I think you're going to enjoy today's format and especially the discussion. I'd like for you to meet the panelists. Let's begin with the gentleman to my right. Let's say our names and tell us a little bit about what you do. Let's go around the table now.
I'm Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, and I'm canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I serve as senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Andrea Luxton. I'm president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I'm also an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. As you can see, we have a great panel assembled here, people that are experts in their field, taking time from their busy schedules to be here. Thank you for coming today. Let's get right to our program. Rachel Den Hollander, former gymnast, was the first of many women to accuse Larry Nassar of sexual abuse, an action which led to more than 150 accusations from women connected to the U.S. gymnastics team or Michigan State University. In her eventual impact statement in the courtroom, Rachel included references to her Christian perspective on what happened and the need for forgiveness and justice. In follow-up interviews, Den Hollander talked further about the Christian church and the challenges she faced dealing with abuse in her home church. In an interview with Christianity Today and talking about sexual abuse, she states, and I quote, "It is with deep regret that I say the church is one of the worst places to go for help. That is hard to say," she continued, "because I am very conservative as an evangelical. But that is the truth," she says. "There are very, very few who have ever found true help in the church," close quote. She continues to posit the reasons for this and blames poor theology, which leads to underestimating the pain and damage of abuse. Churches are not the only ones that can fall short of giving abuse victim support. In this case, Michigan State University has faced considerable criticism for covering up abuse reports for the sake of reputation. Some would suggest that it is reputation, too, that drives churches, not just bad theology, especially when a leader in the church is accused. The panel is asked to consider at least these three following questions. First of all, do you agree that the church is one of the worst places to go for help when it comes to abuse? Or second question, is it bad theology, reputation, or something else that prevents faith communities being more of a place of healing for abuse victims? And then finally, what do or can our faith communities do to be more receptive of abuse victims and help them? Let's return to those who helped to begin the program. We go back to Dr. Luxton. Welcome to the program, and tell us a little more of your thoughts on this subject, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is a very sad topic, and I don't think any denomination, any faith group has got this sorted completely. I think this is an issue that is faced by all of us, and I do think faith communities have a difficult time with abuse for a number of reasons. One of those, I think, is just that abuse usually comes from a position of power. But when you have a spiritual leader, you're combining another level of power, of spiritual power plus just power in general. I think another thing that makes it very difficult in the church is the feeling of guilt that comes by the person who is abused, that I think can often be deeper when it is related to a church environment. I think also churches by their very nature try to resolve, say let's forgive, let's move on. And I think that tendency to have a quick response can often leave the person feeling, I need to forgive, when really their hurt is not yet sorted. So I think there are a number of different issues just related to the nature of church and faith that makes it very, very difficult for our communities to deal with.
All right, thank you very much then. And Dr. Robeck, you also made an opening statement. Elucidate that, please.
Right. I'm glad you brought up the issue of power, because I think power is a huge issue, especially when it comes to clerics who take advantage of people in their congregation. I think there is sometimes even a claim that they have spiritual power and that this is legitimate or valid, within it. I would have to say that I find churches still to be one of the best places that one can go. I mean, when we hear about all of these abuse accounts, and they are genuine and they're real, I think the immediate thing is to generalize and say, oh, they're all that way, when in reality, there are a much smaller number that are that way. Now, I happen to be in a congregation where that did go on, and it's been incredibly difficult. But we tried to clean it up sometimes in back smoke-filled rooms, if you would, not really, but and other times in public sorts of ways. And I think we've made a lot of progress in the 20 years since that happened. But the reality is, it's real, and it leaves all kinds of problems. I think there are several things. I mean, bad theology is one, and I would have to say the lack of theological training for a lot of pastors, especially in my church, where less than 40% even have a bachelor's degree. Therefore, they lack good training in theology. They lack good training in counseling and understanding how these kinds of things can go. I would also say that reputation, churches want to protect their reputation, and we're certainly seeing a lot of that going on in some churches. But I do think that the issue of power is a very big one, and the differential between a pastor and a person in the pew is huge.
All right, thank you. Dr. Matthews and then Reverend Plumley. Dr. Matthews, your take on the subject.
It breaks my heart to read and to hear this young lady say that the church is one of the worst places to go for help. I mean, if you just think about that statement, the church is one of the worst places to go for help, when the church is set up to help people and to minister to people, is very sad. And as Mel mentioned and others, I think one of the challenges is we just need more training. I think churches need more training. I think the reputation piece is very important. And I think what we have to do as church leaders and churches is make a distinction between our character and our reputation. Reputation is who people think you are, but your character is who you really are. And when it comes to reporting abuse, when it comes to setting up a system where it can be prevented, that's character. And a lot of church leaders, especially if it's a senior pastor or a person in power, they hesitate to report. And then what if the report is false? What is that going to do to the accused? It's just an array of issues. But I think the church, we have to be and do everything we can to protect people from all forms of abuse, and I'll say some more later on.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. I got two concerns. One, let's talk about sex. We in the church do not like to talk about sex. We in the church will not talk about sex. You can hardly force it into a conversation, because that's stuff we don't want to. It's not holy. It's not. It is absolutely holy and sacred. In fact, we need to redefine it for the culture. It is a holy thing, and it is something that we need to talk about. And then the second thing I want to talk about is the way church's theology has has set women up to be submissive. They're taught on their wedding day that they need to be submissive, and in many churches are asked, "Will you be?" And you have to publicly state, is this part of what you're going to do? It's no wonder that 35% of all women throughout the world, this is a World Health Organization statistic, 35% of all women have not just been harassed, but have been sexually, physically abused. And 81% of all women in the United States have experienced sexual harassment. And where do they go? If they go to the church, it's usually to sit there in front of a man. Okay? Many of our churches still will not ordain women, still will not put women in positions where they can be the person that a woman would come to. Now, some folks have theological problems with that, and they make other efforts to put women in positions where they can sit down in front of a woman and talk to them, and that's all well and good. But the church does many things. It goes way back. It goes way back to the time that whoever wrote Leviticus wrote that not only the rapist, but the woman raped must be killed.
All right. Well, thank you for those observations. Bishop Olson, welcome to the program today.
Thank you very much. The issue is power, and I think if we look at Jesus' ministry, his primary concern so often was what theologically would be called the Anawim, the weak, vulnerable, those who would be overlooked, those who, in a sense of society, would be disposable. I think also that has to be, for Christians at least, the primary focus in where we start, in the peripheries. And so to provide a safe environment, especially for the weak and vulnerable among us, children especially, I think the primary focus then when we encounter someone where abuse has taken place, then our primary focus has to be care for the victim, which also means as churches we have to reach out to criminal authorities because a crime has been committed, more than even sin. And I think that the best disinfectant is sunlight. And so we need to be transparent, but with a primary expectation of protecting the victim, their anonymity, their reputation. And then I think that is absolutely important. But the best approach, I think, is a prevention and the providing of a safe environment, which involves more than one person, background checks, not only for clergy or staff, but also volunteers, anyone who has access to children, where I think the church has power and it has the ability then to really take the lead in this area in being proactive and mindful of those who are weakest among us, to be a leaven in society where this happens too frequently and is hidden far too often.
Thank you very much. Kenneth Peterson, your perspective on this.
Yes, I'm with Tony. I find this to be just absolutely horrid to even think that when someone can say that the church is not the place to go for help. It's just antithetical to everything I believe. But we have a family situation in which a wedding took place recently, and within a week, they knew they should not be married. And they went back to the church where they were married, and the priest refused to see them. Rachel said something in her interview that I think is very important. She speaks about forgiveness, but she also speaks about justice and forgiveness and repentance. And if we do not have justice along with forgiveness, the forgiveness is worthless. Justice must be a part of that whole situation. Power, of course, that's what the conversation's about. And how we address these issues, and remembering Jesus' concern for the poor, the weak, the oppressed. How do we deal with abuse victims today in the church? And I think many churches have to get their act cleaned up to really be an effective place for people to feel safe to be able to go.
Thank you. I know many churches do require background screening and checks now, as you had mentioned in your comments, Bishop Olson. And Dr. Luxton, does your organization, Seventh-day Adventist Church, and your institution?
We certainly do. And we do try and do training and so on in education. And when I started out, I said can be, because I do think there are places and certain churches or individual groups that are excellent on this front. But I think where they are excellent, it's looking at those whole priorities. Which comes first? Is it the member, the individual, the child, or is it the church and the church's reputation? And is someone believed? I mean, there are occasions when accusations are false, but most of the time, that is not the case. So I think an attitude and an environment where someone feels, I am loved, I am believed, I am important. When we get that kind of environment, I think the church can be a very positive place and a safe place. But I think there's quite a lot of work we need to do with our congregations, with our memberships, not just our leaders, in creating that kind of environment.
Now, with regard to background checks and screenings, volunteers and the professionals, those who are employed, how is it in your church? I know in my church, it's everyone. Anyone who works with any children or any youth in the church, they have to go through background screening.
In our church, if you work with children in the nursery, in our Awana program, youth, you have to have a background check.
All right.
But we're not talking about that. We're not talking about just child abuse and preventing child abuse. We're talking about a situation where the church has presented itself as a place that you cannot go if you are a big girl and have been hurt.
Well, that is her church. And there may be other churches that respond differently. Not to say that there are another church. Yes, Bishop Olson.
I think so. You raise a point that's very important, and that is having victims' assistants who, for example, are women in the case of women abuse, or someone that they would like to talk to who's trained, a social worker, trained in responding to cases of abuse, that has a sensitivity for the primacy of the victim. I think that has to be in place as well. And I think also, that it doesn't have to be a clergy person to meet with them. Because really, as you said earlier, the issue is not entirely gender, it's power differential. All right? And advocacy. And so that, abuse is perpetrated also in many cases by women on small children as well. And we can't be presumptuous. So my other point is just simply this, that we can't be complacent. And policies themselves are not enough. And we have to be constantly aware and made aware, and especially to be vigilant.
Dr. Robick, you had raised your finger, and then we're running out of time very quickly.
It's okay. She was hurt. There's no question that she was hurt and abused in a variety of ways, perhaps, by a secular organization. And maybe she didn't find help in her own local congregation. That's quite possible. But I think what she has done, in a sense, is to take her individual experience and expanded it and generalized it as though all churches are in this situation. And perhaps that's aided and abetted by what we read in the news around the world about various kinds of abuse.
15 seconds, Dr.
15 seconds.
Matthews.
I think the church also, to cover kids, youth, adults, we need to bring church discipline out of eclipse. Because and I know at our church, when you join the church, one of our new members' packets has a church discipline lesson in there that it could be a deterrent, but if a person is evil, they're going to abuse.
Well, all right, that's all the time we have for this segment. It went by very quickly. There is an important announcement I'd like for you to stand by. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. Thank you for standing by. We are going to go to our summations in just a moment, but before we do, I too would like to encourage you to go to our website. There you can read more about the history and the purpose of the Town Hall estates, and you can view programs from past Town Hall meetings like this one. Now let's go to our summations. Let's begin with Bishop Olson.
Jesus placed his focus and primacy upon the weakest among us, the Anawim, the most vulnerable. These include children and any other adult who's vulnerable where power differential is existent. We need to be focused on victims, preventing their abuse, and by providing a safe environment with transparency and care. And finally, when a crime has been committed, criminal authorities should be alerted immediately.
Thank you very much. And now, Reverend Plumley, your summation, please.
Thank you. One of the things we have talked about less on this program is men. I think we need to do a better job of teaching men. I think we need to talk about the role that men play, the power differential between male and female in this country. We need to talk to men about what it means to be a man and what it does not mean, because men are trained up in some very unhealthy ways in our society, not necessarily in the church, but sometimes the church doesn't do much to set a different standard.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Robeck, your summation.
Yeah, for me, there are several questions. Number one, is the church perfect? The answer is no. Could the church do a better job? The answer is yes. Then the question is, why are these issues? And I think it's because the church is made up of sinners. All of us, even at this table, at least I am, a sinner, yes. And I think that really, we have to take that into account. That we're not a perfect community. We are a community on the way. We're following Jesus. Sometimes people slip and fall, and we need to be there to pick them up. Sometimes people are hurt in that process, and they need to be nurtured. And I do think that better training for our pastors in particular would be extremely helpful in knowing how to set up the institutional nature of that church so that people who are in need can have a safe place to go and be heard.
Thank you very much. Dr. Matthews, your summation,
I'll
please.
just repeat what I said earlier, that it's about character and not reputation. And a lot of our churches, we need to not worry about finances going down, membership going down, if there are reports and factual reports of abuse. And I think that's really, really important. Jesus says that the church is the light of the world. We are a city set on a hill, and we need to bring hope and help and love to people who are harmed.
Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Luxton, your
first of all, I'd like to say that I really love the word character. I think the character of our churches and our congregations, I think, is a really, really critical frame that helps us look at this. The other phrase I'd like to put into the conversation is that of what we would call hostile environment. It's something that now is a very typical word used in higher education when you talk about an environment that is hostile. What it means is it's an environment that by its very nature does not encourage positive things to happen. And I think that sometimes we need to be very honest about ourselves and say, is our environment hostile to an honest recognition of what our challenges might be, that we might not be a safe place? And I think if that is true, that is not just an individual issue, that is a corporate issue. And I think sometimes we need to say, we're sorry, we have been a hostile environment. We have not been as we should have been. And I think that kind of admission and openness helps open the door for a lot more transparency and a lot more people coming forward. Because what we hear is only the tip of the iceberg. We need to do more if we're really going to uncover that iceberg.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Canon Peterson, your summation.
Yes, very briefly. We've been discussing an article that was published in Christianity Today about an athlete. This was a secular situation. And I think that we have not been careful in our discussion in one respect to make a separation between abuse that takes place in the secular world and the abuse that is taking place in the church. And indeed, the church, I think, is called upon to be this place. And might we always work harder and harder and harder to be a place that is welcoming and will be able to deal with these things. Just one very quick thing. The Church of England has prepared an extremely helpful document on the gospel, sexual abuse, and the church.
Just a few seconds, I'm sorry.
And I encourage you to read that.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're sorry we are out of time. We'll probably be coming back to this subject sometime in the near future. But until then, the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, and not only in theory but in reality. So now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you. Alabaster cities gleam until